Hello.
Hello.
Wow, why the screaming?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all participants and to all the audiences. And it's time for start because it's 9:30 and I don't want to take your time a lot. So let me introduce our presenters from Sevilla University and also Solar Education, Solar Green Education founder. Let's start from Pedro. I'd like to introduce you first of all. Can you introduce yourself in English and then we can pass the microphone on the other academicians. Just a second. Now we can hear you. Pedro?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I have not heard you properly. Okay, good evening to all of you. Okay, my name is Pedro. I'm from Spain. I study engineering in Spain, geographic economy in Germany, and marketing methods in United States. Okay? But I never use my studies. I always use, or better to say, account with more intelligent people like me. I always have done companies and projects, but this project of today, the solar green education is the most important one. We counted with very intelligent and clever people, Dr. Valeriano, Dr. Manuel, and Professora Bahar. Thank you to you all, very interesting and clever people. I believe that this project will be the best I have done, because the profession of teaching is the best one. You give guide, direction, and education a future for new generation. And I must thank you to you all. Thank you.
If you're over, I can pass the microphone to the Mr. Valerio.
No, preséntame tú, preséntame tú.
Hi, Valerio. No? Could you
Okay.
please introduce yourself in English?
I am Valeriano Ruiz Hernandez, doctor in physics and professor of thermodynamics in the Sevilla University. But in this moment, I am como jubilado.
Retired.
Retired. I working all my life in the energy, in solar energy. In the 10 years ago in climate change. It's my you can see my curriculum vitae.
Yes.
My curriculum vitae in Google. It's the presentation for Mr. Professor Silva.
My name is Manuel.
Could you please mute your microphones?
Okay, había alguien.
Yes, Manuel.
Yes, Manuel Silva. I'm also a professor at the University of Seville at the engineering school. In fact, Valeriano was my professor, so I was long ago one of his students. And most of my professional and academic life has been also devoted to the solar energy field mainly, more than other things. Although I've also worked in other fields, always related with energy, more or less.
So renewable energy is very important. So all people around the world must learn it. So you are very effective people for global warming and also climate change. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So we can start our presentation if you want.
Okay, should we share our screen?
Yes, of course.
Okay, a moment.
I already uploaded your presentation. You can see here as well.
Okay, so well, I will try to do it. If we have problems, perhaps we can. Can you see your screen?
Yes. Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
So we are going to start. I'll be talking during the presentation, but if Valeriano at any moment wishes to say anything, I will. Sorry?
No. Some participants are entering with the noise, so I'm sorry. So you can continue.
Okay.
I'll conduct that.
Well, I was just saying that perhaps we'll share this presentation. Most of the time I'll be speaking because Professor Valeriano doesn't feel very comfortable with English, but well, at any time he will probably help me. And also, if you wish to ask anything, we'll be very pleased to try to answer. Well, okay, so we'll start with this presentation. As you see, the first thing we say is everything is energy. And there you have the famous Einstein's formula. Yes, we could say that energy is something consubstantial to our society, to our life, to our planet, to the world, to the universe in general. We are focusing this presentation on the relation between climate change and energy. First, we'll try to give our view of what climate change is and means for the future of for the humanity and what are the problems associated with it. But we'll especially focus on the causes of the climate change and their relations to the energy system. So we'll start with some initial thoughts, then we'll introduce the matter. We'll talk about the causes of climate change, and we'll try to also to give an overview of the current energy system and how it is evolving to reach the conclusions of the presentation. Well, the first thing is that this presentation is just an advance of the course, which is Climate Change, Energy and Nature. It's a course that we are currently anyone interested in these matters. The first question could be, what can we do regarding the climate change? What can any of us do regarding the climate change? And well, we could perhaps think that returning to the rural environment as we did is leading us to an environmental and social disaster. That's something that more or less nobody discusses at this point. It is also, or it will be in the short or medium term, an economic disaster if we don't do something to put solutions to this problem. Summary, the current energy system is unsustainable. It's not possible to continue like this. What we try to do with this talk is to show that the problem is very clear, but the complexity of the problem and the energy system and the mutual interactions are not so simple, and we need to think about it and try to develop the best solutions possible. First of all, what is climate change? What do we understand by climate change? Well, it is obvious that it is the modification of the climate of the Earth. But what is climate? When we talk about climate, it's quite common to misunderstand it with weather, for example. Well, climate is conventionally defined in a statistical way. It's defined as the statistical meteorological weather in a relatively long time period, which is approximately 30 years. That was gives place to what are called the climate normals. And the climate is characterized by the statistical indicators of different meteorological variables: temperature, atmospheric pressure, humidity, wind, rainfall, aerosols, composition of the atmosphere, etc. in a given place or region and for the whole planet. We have a local climate, regional climate, and global climate. And that includes the different spheres, the atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere that make our world. It's important not to confuse, not to misunderstand climate and weather. Both concepts are obviously very closely related, but weather, it is related to those meteorological variables that affect us in a given place and in a short time period. The variables that we consider here used to be the same, of course, temperature, rainfall, wind, etc., but in a relatively short time period, in periods of days, weeks, months, or perhaps years, but not many years, 1 year or 2 years. When we talk about long term, we should speak about climate, and that's what is relevant from the point of view of our presentation. Now, once we have defined or we have established what climate change is, we are going to look at the relations between the energy system and the climate change. There is a very clear relation. You can see in this picture the atmosphere. You can distinguish it from the rest of the Earth, and most of the processes related between the energy system and the climate change are developing in the atmosphere. Well, the origin of the climate change is what we understand by climate change is the physical, chemical, and biological transformations, modifications that humans produce in its environment, especially related to the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere as a consequence of the combustion of fossil fuels. That's the main cause, as we will see, of climate change. Therefore, there's one key question, and that question is it feasible an energy system without oil, coal, or natural gas?
Grupta bir rica etti, yalnız bırakmayın diye. Zoom'da şeyler var, bir katılım. Şu Hırvatistan'la
Well, there's an answer to that. Not only it is possible, it's unavoidable, and we have to do it. But of course, it is quite difficult. It's very difficult. And perhaps when we think about the relation between energy system and climate change, we directly think of renewable energies. And I would say that most of us would agree that renewable energies are a possible solution to the problem. There's this question, are the renewable energies by themselves the solution to the problem, or perhaps we should count with other energy sources like nuclear fission or fusion? Well, that's something that it's a question that remains open, but we will see that the only possible solution in the long term are renewable energies. Well, in this slide, we try to show the relation between, the explanation of the greenhouse effect that is causing the climate change. And that is very simple. It's an energy balance. We receive from the sun 341 watts per square meter continuously. That's the average for our planet, for the Earth. This radiant power, solar radiation, enters the atmosphere, and the Earth emits a total of 340 watts per square meter that leave the atmosphere as long wave radiation, long wave solar radiation. You can see that there's a small difference, but this difference is this is cumulative, and it causes the global warming that this is a cause of the global warming that we are experiencing. Okay. But well, how have we reached that point? Well, we can see here the measurements of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. This is known as the Killings curve, and it represents the concentration of CO2, which is, of course, the main greenhouse gas, since it was first measured in Mauna Loa in Hawaii by Dr. Kelling in 1958. As you can see, the concentration has been steadily increasing since then until reaching today's levels of more than 400 parts per million of CO2. You can also observe this sawtooth, which probably needs an explanation. That's mainly because these measurements correspond to the Northern Hemisphere. Here in this Northern Hemisphere, we have much more land than in the Southern Hemisphere, and the vegetation that grows in this Northern Hemisphere absorbs more CO2 in spring and summer. As you can see here, in spring and summer, you can, I don't know if you see my cursor, my pointer. I hope you do. In spring and summer, the absorption of CO2 by this all vegetal mass, which grows and has much more activity in these seasons, absorbs a great amount of CO2. The effect is the opposite in winter, when the vegetation decays and CO2 concentration, CO2 emission by the plants also increases. But on average, as you have seen, there's a continuous increase, and that is due to the emissions of our energy system, including there the consumption of fuels by cars, the gas and coal that we burn in our thermal power plants, in the industry, etc. And these processes, these combustion processes, are a permanent focus of CO2 emissions. Excuse me. Well, where are these CO2 emissions originated? Well, we can see here a depiction of that. As you can see, we have, of course, sorry, the emissions mainly originate in the combustion of fossil fuels. That's the main source of emissions. That amounts to 34 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, and in the use, and in second place, in the use of soil. But it's well, approximately 10% of the emissions originated by combustion of fossil fuels. The vegetation absorbs also, as we have mentioned, a total of 11.5 gigatons CO2, and the oceans 9.7. That makes a total of 21.2 gigatons of CO2. As you can see, there's a big difference. The balance is 16.4 gigatons of CO2 per year retained in the atmosphere. And that is what really matters, and what is causing this effect, this global warming effect, and the consequent climate change. So we have a positive CO2 flux to the atmosphere. And in this graph, we can see how these emissions have evolved in time since the end of the 19th century until present. As you can see, the emissions have been continuously growing, and and the main contribution to this increase of the emissions are the emissions associated to the combustion of fossil fuels and the use of sun, mainly combustion of fossil fuels. The change of land use, as we have mentioned, it's also a significant contributor, but the main one is the CO2 emissions derived from the combustion. Perhaps we could. Sorry?
Ya Özgür, neden böyle takip edip duruyorsun? İstediğin zaman niye takip edip duruyorsun ya? Onu anlamıyorum.
Okay, should we continue?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We're not sure if you could hear as well. Well, it's very important to emphasize that these are not calculations, that this is no
models.
It's not the result of any model. These figures correspond to measurements taken all over the world by different methods, by ground-based stations, by sensors mounted on aircrafts and ships, etc. So this is, you can see that it covers, these measurements cover all the world with different density, perhaps in different sites, but they gave us a picture of what is happening in our planet, in our whole planet. Well, this is, I hope we can see the video. This video shows how the atmospheric concentration of CO2 has evolved during the time. Let's try to put it to work. Can you see it well? You can see on the right part of the screen the clock, how the time is, how as the time passes, the CO2 concentration grows steadily. In 1989, we reached 350 parts per million. And the growth of the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere has not stopped to grow since we have records of this variable. The red dot in the graph corresponds to Mauna Loa, which is referenced in this science. Going back in time. And well, you see that the pre-industrial levels were well below the current levels. And that according to the information we have, never in the history we have reached similar levels to today's concentrations of CO2. You can see that in the ice ages, the concentration was less than 200 parts per million, 185. We hope that you have enjoyed the video. And now we'll go to the energy system, and we'll try to explain how electricity and fuels reach our homes and neighborhoods. What we have here is tries to give an overview of the energy system from the energy sources, what we call primary energies, which are the sources of the energy that we consume, to the final consumption of energy, to the final use, which, well, we don't use electricity. We could say that electricity and heat, etc., are not the final uses, but it's lighting, it's heating, it's, for example, what we are doing now, communications, computers, etc. The energy is consumed in many different ways, but mainly we have two forms of intermediate energy, which are electricity and fuels, and you can see the process from the sources to the final use, which is in general a complex process that involves many transformations and adaptations of these forms of energy until we make the final use. In this scheme, we have in the upper part of the sources of the primary energies, we have the renewable energies, sun, wind, hydro, biomass, and in the lower part, we have the exhaustible primary energies like nuclear, uranium, oil, natural gas, or coal. And as you all know, the processes involved in their use, which includes mining, includes transportation, includes well, then transformations in different factories, in the different energy factories, like thermal power plants, or hydropower plants, or photovoltaic plants, and well, nuclear power stations, etc. And we need the use of these electricity and fuels, these intermediate forms of energy, requires different distribution channels, power networks, and gas pipelines, etc. The adaptation to our needs by the distribution, the first global distribution, then local distribution, and then the different main points of consumption, which are residential, services, industry, agriculture, transport, etc. So we have it's important to have very clear that electricity and fuels are fundamental intermediate forms of energy for all countries and consumers. And we could not understand climate change without understanding what are the transformations involved in the energy system. And well, perhaps we could have the impression, at least in many of our societies, that renewable energies are experiencing an impressive growth, and that they are already a good part of of the energy we use, but the reality is that at the end of 2017, that's yesterday, 80% of the energy we are using in the world comes from fossil fuels, and only 10%, a little bit more than 10%, from what we could call modern renewable energies. We could add to that almost 8% of traditional biomass use, which is not always renewable, and we have a small share of nuclear energy. In this renewable energy, we could include wind, solar, geothermal, ocean powers, biofuels for transport, which are still a very small fraction of the energy used for transport, hydropower, and that's for electricity, and approximately 4% for thermal uses. So we see that we are very far from having a system that really benefits from renewable energies. And why is this? Of course, there is history, and well, as we all have the impression, and it's true, that renewable energy is growing very fast. We can see here the evolution of the renewable power, renewable electricity capacity during the last years, from 2007 to 2017. And you can see that we started 2007 with roughly 1,000 gigawatts of installed power, and today we have more than double of that amount. 2,000, probably today will be close to 2,000 gigawatts, sorry, 2,500 gigawatts of renewable electricity. And most of it is still hydropower, which is very relevant. Wind energy has been growing steadily, as well as solar PV. While biomass, electricity generated from biomass, has experienced a smaller growth, and CSP is also growing, but very slowly, or slower than it should. Photovoltaic PV is perhaps the form of renewable electricity that is growing faster. You can see here the impressive growth. In 2008, there was little bit more than 20 gigawatts installed in the world, and now we have more than, well, in 2018, more than 500 gigawatts, and this is growing. This is still growing very fast. You can see that this growth is really impressive, and that is a consequence of the evolution of the technology, and especially of the reduction in the costs of this technology. Concentrated solar power is a different technology that requires first. Yes, Mariano was pointing out that it's our specialty. We have developed most of our work, our research and professional work in this field. We would like to see better evolution in this technology, but you can see that there was a very significant growth in the capacity, in the installed capacity until 2013, especially in Spain, but also in other parts of the world. And since then, the increase has been much slower. mainly due to the stagnation, to the reduction of the investment in this technology in Spain, where there has not been any new power plants since 2013, and in the United States is something quite similar. Now the main growth comes from China and Middle East. Also in Morocco. There's an interesting policy
India.
Fomenting this technology. India, but perhaps the main field now is China. In China, there is a very relevant program for the development of this technology. This technology has a significant difference with PV. Is that the energy is first transformed, the solar energy is first transformed to heat and then to electricity, but the heat can be stored in an efficient and relatively economic way. So these plants have the option to store energy and to provide stability to the system. Perhaps a combination of this potential for storage with the cheap price of the PV electricity could be a very interesting solution in many countries to achieve a system based mainly on solar energy, or at least in a very significant fraction from solar energy. Other renewable energies are, for example, the low temperature solar energy that we all know. There is a lot of installations all over the world, but it's still insufficient. We are not taking full advantage. It's true. Yeah, we are not taking full advantage of that. Turkey, we know that it's very relevant. That is one of the countries with greater development of this technology, and also manufacturers. Well, you can see here that there is also a significant growth, but this growth is slowing down, and of course we are not taking advantage of the potential of low temperature solar energy to contribute to the thermal needs of our societies. Wind energy. Yes, wind energy, you can see there's a steady growth. Wind energy is a very consolidated technology. You can see that the growth has been relatively steady. During the last years, it seems to have speed up a little bit more, but well, we could say that it's perhaps within the renewable electricity technologies, perhaps the most mature, since the development started already in the two last decades of the 20th centuries, and the growth has been quite steady. In Spain, for example, wind energy is the main contributor to renewable electricity in terms of electricity produced during the year. And during some days, more than 50% of the electricity consumed in Spain comes from wind energy. This is also similar in other countries like Germany and some states in the United States, etc. So it's a very significant and very relevant renewable energy technology too. But well, renewable energies are growing, but still they are only, the modern renewable energies, only 10%. And why is that? That is because we keep on using fossil fuels. And not only that, we are not only using it, but our authorities are subsidizing these fossil fuels all over the world. You can see here in this map that well, practically all the countries in the world have subsidies, and some of them very relevant for fossil fuels. Of course, the most relevant are in terms of money per capita are in the Middle East. We have, but well, it's a quite generalized situation that fossil fuels are being subsidized in all the world, including United States, Mexico, the Soviet Union, and the Arab countries, well, more or less everywhere in the world. Well, and then what should we do to, we are already close to conclude, what should we do to achieve a reasonable energy future? Well, of course, what we need is a radical change of the approach we are following until now. We have to look at what are really our energy needs. What is the energy demand from a thermodynamic point of view? The economics are important, but that will come later. And once we have that, of course, we have to consider that there's an economic value in all forms of energy, and we have to consider that. But we need an optimization strategy that leads us to a more sustainable energy system. And sustainability will also mean the optimization of the cost for the consumers. How can we do that? Well, one of the keys is the change of the configuration of the energy system. It's important to think of a different energy system which is more distributed, because the proximity of the generation of the production points of energy and the consumption is essential to increase its efficiency. This distributed generation and the management of the demand are key factors for this new energy system. In this context, we are sure that renewable energies are an essential tool. Renewable energies are in general more adapted than conventional energies to this distributed concept of the energy system. And one way to do this is to progressively replace the centralized system of intermediate energies, which is today's system, with large power stations, with large thermal power plants, large hydro, etc., by a new energy system that applies the concepts of bioclimatic architecture to reduce the consumption. So they are acting on the demand. Solar water heating that will also result in a reduction of the demand of fuels or electricity, and of course generation of electricity, decentralized generation of electricity, heating and cooling at homes using solar energy or biomass, etc. And that if we do that, try to do that at our homes as much as we can, at least in a similar quantity to the consumption, then we are we will be walking towards this more efficient and sustainable energy system. Well, to conclude with our presentation, we could say first of all that our species, mankind, and all the living beings are facing an extremely grave problem, which is climate change. And that the only way we have to stop or to at least to slow it down is the modification of the energy system. And in these circumstances, we can take two attitudes. One is to think that little or nothing is being done and stop there. And the other is to be conscious that something is being done, but still insufficient and irrelevant in relation to climate change. And these actions that we need to take require the involvement of all of us, of our governments, but also of all of us as individuals, and from all our different responsibilities and places in the society. If we do so, perhaps the public authorities will confront their responsibilities and obligations. And we'd like to conclude with something, with a couple of sentences. This one is in Spanish, sorry. It's a sentence from Martin Luther King. I'll try to translate it. It's, the more we think about our 20th century, we won't think the wars are the bad acts of the bads, but the silence of the good persons. And yes, well, here you can see a picture of a region close to where we live. In fact, it's the region where Valeriano was born. As you can see, it's a beautiful picture of countryside with oak trees, etc. And well, this is something that you can see there, that sentence. We have concluded with this. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, just we are at your disposition.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for this amazing presentation. We really learned a lot. Thank you. And it was very... Can you hear me? Somebody's talking like me. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Could you write your questions for the presentation? And first of all, I would like to say, as educators, what do you advise us to do? I can't hear you.
Me? Sorry.
Sorry.
I can hear you, Arlinda.
Shall I
Have
start?
you heard me?
Yeah, of course. I'm listening to you.
Okay. What do you suggest us? What do you suggest teachers to do at school to make more conscious pupils according to climate change?
Sorry, Bahar, the question is directed to me or to the professors?
Professors. After
Okay.
that, you can ask your question. Okay, Arla?
Of
Oh,
course.
Sorry, I thought it was not. Nos preguntan
It was for you.
just one moment. Nos preguntan que qué podrían hacer los profesores para
enseñar esto. Bueno, la presentación lo pueden copiar.
Well, of course, well, first of all, you can use this presentation. It's freely available for all of you if you wish to use it. And of course, is to try to transmit to your students
Language.
this.
Estamos preparando un curso específico para esto, precisamente.
Yes, to try to transmit
Mucho más amplio que esto. Esto es
the consciousness about this. We are, as we mentioned at the beginning, we are already preparing a specific course addressing these topics in more depth and oriented to different levels, of students, starting from the institute, from the school.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Arlinda, do you have question?
First of all, I would like to thank you to you and the professors that are for their excellent presentation to us. First of all, I would like in the beginning they mentioned three kinds of climate change. In fact, three types of climate change. That was physical, biological, and chemical. I would like to ask them which of the three types mostly affects the mankind in general. This is the first question. And for the next, I would like to ask them if we can share their presentation in order to make workshops here to disseminate them in the schools where we teach.
Si pueden compartir la presentación, sí.
Sí.
Yes, of course you can share the presentation. It's no problem. It's available for all of you. We will be very pleased.
A little present for us to you.
Another question, please. Sorry, I would like to ask you, which is the first target that we should aim at, the parents or the students?
Los padres o los estudiantes?
Both.
I would say both. I would say that both are equally important. In the end, they have to be conscious of these problems and.
Habría que hacer una presentación específica para los alumnos,
yes,
y otra para los padres, pero con muchos puntos en común.
Of course, yes. Of course, the approach would be probably different. There would be many common points between that directed to the parents and that directed to the students, but they should also be different. But both are very relevant, of course.
Dear professors, thank you very much for your presentation. It was excellent. Bahar, thank you very much, and thank you very much to all the participants that participated, especially to my colleagues that are in the webinar right now. They are participating in that, and they are listening to you carefully. So we hope that we can cooperate in the future all together. Thank you very much.
We hope so
too. Thank you to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, do you have another question? Helena, Silvia, Graziella, Ashra, Yuki. They're all my project partners. Most of them are my project partners from Erasmus, and I really thank them for their participation. And Johanna was here, and Nihal, and my friends especially. I really thank you. Arminda is also here, the other founder of our project, eTwinning project. Arminda, do you want to say anything?
Bahar, thank you very much.
I know Arlinda is different. Arminda is different. Arminda is from Portugal.
Yes, I'm from Portugal.
She is also the other founder of our project.
Yes, it's okay.
I arrived now in the presentation because the hour is not the same. I'm sorry.
It's okay. She is from Portugal. I think Portugal is 2 hours back, something like that. So they are so late.
In Portugal, yes. In Portugal is earlier. It's now
earlier.
Now it's
8:30.
Yes, 8:30.
Yeah. Now in Turkey it's 10:30. So in Spain it's 9:30. So it's changing. It's really confusing thing. Yes. Do you have any questions? If you don't, I'd like to say thank you to these amazing people, Valerio and Manuel, and also Pedro. I really thank you a lot.
Here, Bahar, is
Pedro, we
Arlinda
don't hear you.
Yeah, is Arlinda raising her hand?
Arlinda, would you like to say anything?
No, guess the
It
hand
stayed
is
like
still
this,
raised.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
She couldn't put it down. Pedro, yes, the last words
I closed
are for you.
Thank you to you. Thank you to you to organize. Very nice done. Thank you, Bahar. Thank you, Dr. Valeriano and Manuel. And thank you to everybody. Was a very interesting conference.
I really thank you for taking your precious time with us. If you don't have any questions, goodbye. Thank you.
Bye to everybody.
Bye.
Abid wants to say something.
In the beginning of the webinar, Pedro has said so good sentences about this project. So I would like to thank him. But I wanted to thank him in the beginning, but the meeting had started fastly, so I couldn't say. But now I would like to say my good willings to him, because he spoke very good about our project. So it was nice to hear that sentence. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you to you. Thank you to everybody.
I think we will continue collaboration with Valeriano and Manuel and also Pedro. So stay home and stay safe.
Bye bye now for everybody.
See you again.
See you again. Bye.
Thank you all participants. Sorry. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Seda.
¿Salimos?
Sí.
Seda, you are the host. You must finish it. Seda sensin başkanı hani. Senin kapatman lazım tatlım, bende değil ya. Seda. Okay, we can go out. we can sign out, sorry. Seda. Seda.